This time for real. What's up, skeptics? I'm your host, Zoe McDaniel, and you're listening to Professional Skepticism. Okay, so today we have Mandy here with us. It's been a long time since you've been on. I know we talked about the
Amy Manor.
Yeah, that was the second episode.
Oh yeah, okay. No, we talked about like your life and.
Yeah, I think that was the last time. I think before that, though, we had done like the episode about the number 13, and we did the weed episode.
Did we? Mm-hmm. That many episodes?
Yeah, you've been on a couple.
I feel like it's only been like twice. Anyways.
At least 4.
Wow.
A true friend. Okay, so today, let me go ahead and just, we're going to trigger warning this entire episode. So if this is something that you don't want to talk about, that's totally fine. But today we're going to be talking about Marilyn Manson. So I want a trigger warning for violence, sexual assault, rape, kidnapping, human trafficking. Like, sorry, it's not funny. I'm just laughing at like how awful it is, as like a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
It's not funny.
Awkward.
It's just one of those things where it's like,
oof.
Yeah, like when I like tell my own personal traumas, I just laugh because it's almost like it's like unbelievable. So saying all those words out loud, I'm like, wow, like That's really what we're going to be talking about today. So Marilyn Manson. Do you want to say anything before we get started?
No, I'll let you get into it and I'll chime in.
Okay, cool. All right. So we're going to start. I'm going to take you through Marilyn Manson's life. So we're going to start by talking about like his early years and then how he kind of got into the music scene. Then we're going to go through the music scene. And then at the end, we'll talk about all of the controversies, which there's a lot. And I don't even think I've got them all just because there's so much. And there's a lot of hearsay and a lot of stuff that is like not well, I don't think any of it is technically substantiated with like cold hard evidence, which is why nothing has come of it. But well, that's not true. Some of it is, but I mean more of like the sexual assault stuff. So I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just excited to talk about this because there's something wrong with me. All right. Early years. So Marilyn Manson's name is Brian Hugh Warner.
Brian.
Yeah, I know. He's known professionally, like I said, as Marilyn Manson. He is an American singer, songwriter, actor, painter, and writer. He was born in Ohio on January 5th, 1969. Capricorn. Yeah, which I think makes sense.
See, I've only ever listened to like maybe like 10 or 15 of his songs total, and I've never really watched anything other than like just brief clips, so I wouldn't be able to tell if he's a Capricorn from that.
I think based on the interviews that I watched and like the documentaries that I saw, he seems very well-spoken and very intelligent and very gentle, which is interesting, like juxtaposed with his stage persona. Whenever I think of Capricorns, I just think of very like organized, analytical people who talk a lot.
Yeah, I'd say that too. Hardworking. Okay. CEO type people.
Yeah. You're like, I have a Capricorn rising, no big deal. So, like I said, born in Ohio, he had a devoutly religious family. They attended the local Episcopal church. His father was Roman Catholic. And then he went to the Heritage Christian School until 10th grade, where he was kicked out. He had to go to public school. He was not very well accepted at public school. But while he was in his Christian school, he was taught to avoid dark temptation, reform to the Anglican religion of God, all this stuff. They played them music that was like not godly, and they showed them things that were not godly, and this just kind of influenced him to be more drawn to them. He was like, I like this idea of like going against it. And he, in interviews, claims to be spiritual. He was like, it's not that I don't believe in like spirituality. A lot of his qualms are with the Christian religion not living by Christian standards.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. All of his music is like Antichrist Superstar, like just anything that's like the opposite of godly.
Exactly. So he's like, yes, I'm spiritual. I just like have problems with Christianity, but like he grew up, you know, learning these things, and it seems like he had a pretty normal childhood. His mother's name was Barbara Wire, and his father's name was Hugh Warner. I was like, wait, where's the last name? In interviews I saw, or I think it was the Rolling Stones magazine and some other sources as well, Manson's childhood was described as pretty normal. And I'm going to just call him Manson. I don't feel like going back and forth between Brian and Warner, which I think some of my notes where I took quotes, they refer to him as Warner. But for me, I'm just going to say Manson. And then if there's a quote that refers to him as Warner, it's the same person.
Cool.
But yeah, so it seems like he had a normal childhood, like I said. He was kind of a douchebag to his mom. He had very much like Kyle syndrome. Like he would fight her.
Oh, no.
There was one incident that he even told about where he took a perfume bottle and like smashed on her and cut her and scarred her because he thought she was cheating on his father.
Yikes.
So very aggressive towards his mom. There's something I read somewhere along in my research. I think it might have been Rolling Stone magazine as well, where they talked about he had like some sort of label called like Beat Up Your Mom Records or something that only lasted for a little bit, but he was very much like, he like poked fun at it.
That's sus. My mom always tells me never date men who are never nice to their moms. So, sorry, Brian.
You're off Amanda's roster, Marilyn Manson. Yeah, so like, you know, I feel like I have seen this playing out with people before. Like, you just see people be rude to their mom and you're like, what the fuck? And like, I'm not saying this is okay at all, but I don't feel like this is super out of the norm for maybe like a grungy teenage boy in the 90s. Well, actually in the 90s, he was already a grown man.
What about like smashing a perfume bottle over his mom's head? That's 80s. A little extreme.
Well, I don't know if it was over her head, but like.
But even like just violence.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. Okay. I'm just saying that like, I just feel like that's a common trope is like teenage boys like beating up on their moms and moms babying them because they're like, oh, it's my little boy.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that's her fault either because I don't know exactly, but it seems like despite the way he treated her, they still loved each other, and like she supported him through his career as like an adult. Like him and his parents, his mom and dad were some of his biggest supporters. So despite him being a dick to her, like they were still, that's their little baby Brian. You know, that's what I'm trying to illustrate, this image. Okay. Him and his father, his dad, supposedly in interviews, some women who met him said that he was just of the times, you know, old white men saying whatever they want, thinking they can say whatever they want to women. He liked younger women. Not necessarily an issue for me.
How young we talking?
Like, I think there was like 17-year-olds at these shows, and like when he first started performing, and like his dad was pretty much as soon as Manson started being an artist, his dad was in support of it and would go to a lot of his shows. So like he'd be at these shows like interested in the young girls there.
Oof.
Yeah. Thanks. So that's a problem. But so him and his dad had this weird relationship. He said something, like one girl said something about him. If you were introduced to Manson's father, he would be like, what's the sweetest thing that you've ever had in your mouth aside from my dick? Like, just some weird shit like that. And that was also from Rolling Stone. I read that somewhere. So he just made inappropriate jokes. And, like, again, I'm not making excuses for it, but it just seems like it was, like, you know, this is, like, the 80s, 90s. Like, just think of, like gross butt rock kind of dads and, like, glam rock. Like, just that was kind of how it was.
The norm.
Yeah. Like, he took Manson to see Kiss live, like, as a kid. So they had this kind of, like, very American-sounding family. Like, son beats up on the mom, dad's gross, like, just this little rock and roll gross family is what I'm imagining. Like, his mom loved Elvis and Alice Cooper. His dad took him to see Kiss. So it's very of the times.
Even though they were, like, strictly Christian, they did all that?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Apparently.
Yeah.
That's what I thought too when I was like, so at first they like, I was watching these documentaries, they're painting this very religious picture, and then I was like reading and I'm like seeing all these other experiences where, you know, Manson's beating up on his mom and his dad's being gross. So just because someone's religious doesn't mean that they're a good person.
Which is why he didn't like it in the first place, because probably his family was like, well, we're not doing it to the T, you know? Maybe he was like, well, my family's not doing it, why should I?
Yeah. I think he just, I don't know if it was necessarily that. I think a lot of it was just him not liking, well, yeah, I guess you're right. He didn't like the hypocrisy of it. The, like, you know, this is how we should live, but this is how we are living. I think later on I have in here somewhere that he talks about, like, the lack of hospitality that Christians have for people. Like, if you really want to save people and show people the way, then why are you ostracizing people that are different from you? Yeah. Like, that's not how you teach people things. So I think there was a lot that went into play. I think generally, though, there's not much in his childhood that I could see that would really give way to him growing up to be such a dick. Like, a lot of people had that same childhood.
Yeah.
And you don't have to grow up and be a dick.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and I'm not saying that, like, you know, if something happens in your childhood, you're allowed to grow up and be a dick. But a lot of times, like, in these situations, we see things.
It makes sense. It's like, oh, okay, you're a dick because of this.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like this wasn't really, like, you went to Christian school and you beat up on your mom. You know what I mean? Like, so anyways, he's growing up. He moves to Florida with his parents. They all relocate to Florida. And this is when he starts going to, I believe it was a community college, to work on his journalism degree. And he started writing for a magazine called 25th Parallel. And he was, like, mostly in the music and fashion realm of it. I think he was actually interviewed for the magazine because he was already doing the, like, emo, black, punk look, goth, yeah. And that, I think that was, like, what kind of led him into working for them. And then he started doing interviews. And this was, so eventually he becomes the senior editor for this magazine in their music area. And he interviewed, so this is also in Florida when he became Marilyn Manson. So he interviewed Marilyn Manson as himself, Brian Warner. So he, like, wrote an interview where he asked himself questions, essentially. Bruh. Because no one knew who Marilyn Manson was yet. So it wasn't, like, at his job, no one knew, like,
that's a smart way to get famous.
So he was like, this was his first ever published interview, and no one knew that it was him.
That's interesting. I love that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool too. Yeah,
that's the Capricorn in him scheming.
You got to do what you got to do to make it, and, like, that's pretty smart. Like, use the opportunity you have, because it is a valid interview in a sense. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's not like you're just asking yourself questions.
Was this, like, during his first, like, album or something that he had put out, or just he had singles?
At this point, no, he hadn't there wasn't an album out yet. So he just moved to Florida. He's going to school. He's getting into the music scene. I watched some documentaries where, like, he would organize poetry nights and go do poetry, and he would go to these, like, music shows and perform. And this was, like, right when he started becoming Marilyn Manson, but they don't have an album out yet.
I see. So it's just, like, an alter ego at this point, kind of.
Well, he's making music. He's just not, like, just releasing as soon as you're an artist, you don't just immediately have an album.
Okay. Okay.
Like, you gotta go and perform, and you know what I mean? So he's, like, making music as Marilyn Manson. It's the 90s, or, like, 89, I think, at this point. So he's, you know, it's not like today where you just can, like, record stuff on your, like, what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So Marilyn Manson in the Florida punk hardcore scene. And now I'm going to introduce you to, like, where the music actually starts happening. So, okay. Manson's stage name, Marilyn Manson, came from combining Marilyn Monroe and Charles Manson.
Okay. I feel like I've definitely heard that, but I didn't, like, remember it until you just said it now.
Yeah. So the concept was, like, some people look at it as, like, oh, she was this beautiful, glamorous woman, and then we have this, like, juxtaposed, really terrible man. But if you look at it, they both had really tragic lives. Like, Marilyn Manson's life was very tumultuous, and so was Charles Manson. So either way, like, it's kind of just...
You mean Marilyn Monroe?
Marilyn Monroe, yes.
Okay, cool.
I did this in the Charlie Manson episode, too. I said Marilyn Manson, and then I was like, what is going on? My brain can't keep up with all these, like, names together. So anyways, that's where the name came from. Okay, so Marilyn Manson's band is called Marilyn Manson, but originally it was Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids, and it was formed by him and guitarist Daisy Berkowitz in Fort Lauderdale, Florida in 1989. And they were inspired by a ton of different bands at the time. Kiss, Queen, T-Rex, David Bowie, Prince, Alice Cooper, so many more. There was a lot of glam rock influence in the beginning. So they quickly developed like a huge cult following in the South Florida punk and hardcore music scene because they were doing intentionally shocking things, which is what he's known for.
Yeah.
So this is from Wikipedia. Band members often performed in women's clothing or bizarre costumes. Live shows routinely featured amateur pyrotechnics, naked women nailed to crucifixes, children locked in cages, as well as experiments in reverse psychology and butchered animals' remains. Within 6 months of forming, they were playing sold-out shows in 300-capacity nightclubs throughout Florida.
Oh, good for them.
So people were just, like, enamored with their performance, which I think is really the big thing about Marilyn Manson is it's more than just music. It's all about the, like, atmosphere that he creates of, like, it's very theatrical.
Are you going to talk about the time that you went and saw him?
Yeah, probably.
I was about to say, was it like that at the show or no?
I mean, there wasn't, like, naked people. And
I know he's older now and it was...
And it's the Fillmore, so
Yeah.
the Fillmore's not going to let anything fucking fun happen.
That's true.
Yeah, when I saw Marilyn Manson, there was Bible burning on stage. It was honestly not as super theatrical as it could be. He was old. I saw him in 2018, and it was, interesting. It was, I think, right after Twiggy Ramirez had been removed from the group, because I think that happened in 2017. So there was a different guitarist. The crowd was awful. It was oversold. So we were literally just packed in there like sardines, and the whole time this man just had his hand like cupped on my ass, like literally the entire time.
Ugh.
And like people were like pushing me up over the crowd, like without me being like, hey, I want to go up. People just would like it was so many people that it was like, you just go up.
That's crazy.
And the guitarist threw his pick. I should have grabbed the pick for this. He threw the pick into the crowd, and the guy that was grabbing my butt caught it and gave it to me.
How kind.
So kind. Like, it's the least he could do for me after he groped my ass the entire night. I literally was like, dude, what the fuck is your problem? And I kept trying to get away. And like, it was just a really vicious crowd. And at the time, like, I had listened to Marilyn Manson, but I didn't really know anything about his come-up story or anything like that. So I wasn't super familiar with, like, the type of people that liked Marilyn Manson. And I was having this conversation with Dad downstairs about how, like, I don't think that he has an influence, of course, but I don't think that, like, his behavior necessarily allows other people to behave a certain way. And I'm not saying that every single Marilyn Manson fan is, like, gross or douchey. Like, I mean, I was there, like, and I know people that were there, and I know that, like, not everybody's that way. But it was probably the worst crowd I've ever been in. And I go to a lot of music events, like festivals, raves, like everything. And it was the worst experience being in the crowd that I've ever had. And I was super anxious the whole time, and it was really hot and gross, and there's like fire on the stage. But the performance was good. Like, but one thing that was interesting was he kept going off the stage, like every song he would go off stage, and I was like, okay, is he like doing drugs? Like, what is going on? And he was like probably at his heaviest when I saw him, and he just didn't look good. Like, he did not look like he was doing well.
About that. You were saying he just did not look good.
He didn't. He used to be so beautiful and sexy to me. Like, I love looking at, like, his young photos. I'm like, you
look good young.
You are so everything. But, like, I mean, he's also, like, 53 or something now. So, like, when I saw him, he's getting older. But he doesn't look like he took care of himself. So, anyways, that was my experience with the Marilyn Manson concert. So, their lyrics for the band were criticized by American politicians and examined in congressional hearings, and several U.S. states actually enacted legislation that banned... Oh, that was so cute. Ziggy's on the floor. They banned the group from performing in state-operated venues, so they weren't allowed to play in some places.
That's interesting.
And then in the U.S. alone, 3 of the band's albums have been awarded platinum status, and 3 more went gold, and the band has had 8 releases debut in the top 10, including 2 #1 albums. Manson has been ranked at number 44 on the list of the top 100 heavy metal vocalists by Hit Parader, and along with his band has been nominated for 4 Grammy Awards. And Marilyn Manson, earned an additional Grammy nomination for his work on Kanye West's Donda, which we'll come back to at the end of the episode.
What? That's crazy. I never even heard. I didn't even know that they were, like, intertwined like that.
Yeah, it was kind of his, like, comeback after everything, so we'll talk about it. So that was kind of like a synopsis of how the music was received and how it started. Let's talk about his musical career. So, Nine Inch Nails' Trent Reznor was interested in Marilyn Manson early on. He's like making waves. He's doing something different that like nothing else like this had been going on at this time. And Manson had actually interviewed Trent Reznor for 25th Parallel. So they had this like little connection starting, and Trent offered him a record deal on his label Nothing Records, which was a part of Interscope Records, which Interscope had actually like offered them a record deal, but they refused to release the album unless Marilyn Manson like pulled back some of those Charles Manson references along with other things in the music, which like that's the whole point. Like Marilyn Manson is going to reference Charles Manson, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of what his whole stick is. And supposedly the British government tried to ban their first album, which I thought was funny. But so basically Trent Reznor was like, no, you can record on mine, on my like subset of this label. So their first record came out in 1994. And this was Portrait of an American Family. And this came out, this was like the era of Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. And it made these bands look tame, which like, they're pretty tame. They're just like grungy music, but this was the era where grunge was like the big deal. So for Marilyn Manson to come out with what he does, people were like
blown away.
Right. He said that the whole purpose of his music was to attempt to dissect the hypocrisy of the world. He had lots of cultural references in his music, like to the Evangelist, to David Lynch, which comes back around. Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails took them out on their first tour in 1994, and this is what kind of blew them up to popularity. And one day, this is like so random, but he did tour with Alice Cooper, which was cool because that was one of his like inspirations. And Ozzy Osbourne, that was a huge inspiration for him, and they become friends later on.
They were going to go on a tour, actually, I think, like right before the pandemic. And I was like, oh, I want to go see that. And then I think either Ozzy or Marilyn like just dropped out the tour. And
well, it's Marilyn because he's like his career is dead.
Yeah.
Like he can't, like no one's going to want to see him tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, 1994, he gains this cult following. So their debut album wasn't really a commercial success, but it did have a big cult following and it did get the attention that he was looking for. His whole purpose was to be controversial. He said somewhere, the quality of an artist is measured equally by the people who love you and the people who hate you. You need both, which I think is an interesting take. I don't know if that's necessarily, I don't know. I think it's probably true. Like my therapist is always like, if you don't have at least a hater, you're not doing something right.
I mean, I would agree to that statement because I think of all the famous people I know who have all obviously all kinds of haters, and then I think of the people that aren't famous and they're all just really liked people. The hate is what gets you famous, I feel like sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so he got a lot of attention from the American Family Association, which was a fundamentalist Christian group that did not like him. He was trying to be shocking, but people obviously thought he was satanic. The satanic panic from like the 80s and the early 90s was still very prevalent in people's minds. His goal, like we've kind of mentioned already, was to expose the hypocrisy and ignorance of Christian America. Because there's like all these videos of people outside his concerts protesting, being like, this man is terrible, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you really feel like he's terrible, then like, why don't you do the Christian thing and like try to help him? Or, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, you're not that, so that kind of, they were.
Save him.
Right. They're feeding into it. The second album, like you mentioned, Antichrist Superstar, this blew him up. This was a commercial success. And in 1994, I guess I put these a little bit out of order. Marilyn Manson came into contact with Anton LaVey. Are you familiar? Mm-hmm. He is the founder of the Church of Satan. Oh. So there's a difference between the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple, and I am not super well versed in that, but I'm pretty sure the Church of Satan is the controversial, problematic one that people aren't really like true Satanists don't really like to affiliate with. But, you know, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But so supposedly the Church of Satan doesn't actually worship the devil or Satan, but I always was told it was the other way, that the Satanic Temple was the one that they don't sit there and like worship Satan. The Church of Satan does. I don't know. Y'all can let me know. But either way, to the mass public, they don't give a shit. Marilyn Manson is now affiliated with the Church of Satan. They don't care like the logistics of whether or not they're actually, you know, worshiping Satan or not. It's just, it feeds into his image some more. So LaVey made him an honorary member of the sect, and he was joined into the priesthood.
The priesthood?
Yeah.
Love that.
Okay, so like I said, the second album was great, but the band started to suffer after this album. They started using substances on a daily basis, including pills, absinthe, which absinthe was a huge influence in Marilyn Manson's life.
That's like just like basically pure alcohol almost, right?
I'm not even really familiar. I've never had absinthe. I know people who drink absinthe, and you don't need a lot of it, I'm pretty sure. But it's like one of those things that it's more than just like alcohol, if that makes sense. Like it's like almost like a deliriant or hallucinogen. Like it's like a lifestyle. If you're drinking absinthe all the time instead of just like drinking vodka all the time, you're having a different experience.
Interesting. I've never tried it.
I
basically thought it was just like strong ass vodka.
It's just really intense alcohol. I haven't had it, so maybe I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of it based on like what I've been reading from like all of this, is that like absinthe is like no joke. Like you're not just casually drinking absinthe. It's like people who drink moonshine or something. Like I don't know. So that's my understanding of it. But he would take pills, drink absinthe, do cocaine, lots of cocaine. People have said that at parties and stuff, he would offer cocaine like hors d'oeuvres. Would you like some cocaine?
Hors d'oeuvres? Was that like just like on a platter kind of?
You don't know what hors d'oeuvres are?
No.
It's like when you go to a party and they're like walking around with like a platter of like little snacks. They're like, would you care for an hors d'oeuvre?
Oh.
It's like an appetizer.
Okay. That's kind of what I had in my mind. I just needed to confirm.
Yeah. I don't know how to spell it, so I spelled it like really wrong. It's like a French word. But yeah, so after the second album, they're still making music. Manson insists on the band enduring sleep deprivation during the music process to create a dark environment to match the album's themes. So these artists that he's working with, his band, like they're not sleeping and they're just in the studio making this like fucking creepy music.
Nodding out like,
yeah, like literally not okay. Tensions were running high. This was when Daisy Berkowitz, like from the original helping found the band, was like, I'm out of here. Like this is not it for me. So he left halfway through the recording process. And there was some sort of lawsuit about like royalties and stuff later on between them that I think was settled outside of court. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't really feel like that was there's just so much controversies to talk about. I was like, I'm not getting all the details on every single one. Sorry. Yeah. So at this point, this is when he starts making TV appearances, getting roles in movies and shows and whatever. And his first TV appearance was in David Lynch's Lost Highway, which I think is super cool. I haven't seen it. I'm going to watch it because David Lynch, anything is like super creepy and cool. Then he was on Californication, Sons of Anarchy, American Gods, and these are more recent shows. He was also in Party Monster and so many more.
That was a good one.
Party Monster?
Yeah.
I love that movie.
I think you and I watched it together for the first time.
Yeah, it's a good movie. Me, you, and Ashley, maybe?
No, I think we had rewatched it, but I think you and I like watched it together for the first time.
Okay, that's a good movie.
Yeah.
This is also when he started diving into being a painter. He was dedicating more time to it, particularly in like 1999. He was supposedly disappointed in the way that artists were being treated in the art world and wanted to like try to make a difference and whatever. He used absinthe a lot when he was painting in his work. And this was supposedly an ode to Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, which is... So I didn't realize this, but Van Gogh supposedly was a very avid absinthe user. And this is supposedly what caused a lot of, or maybe not caused, but contributed to his mental health state.
Van Gogh was the one that kaputted himself?
Yeah, he cut his ear off and he ate the paint and he did Starry Night.
Yeah, okay. I always get Picasso and Van Gogh mixed up.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So Van Gogh was very mentally unwell. And I guess people think that absinthe could have played a part in that. I think also he probably just had some mental health issues, and then he's drinking absinthe all the time, which is not good.
Yeah.
Salvador Dali was also a big influence for Manson's work, and he actually had art exhibits in Germany and America. I think the first one was in like maybe 2001 or something, but he took his art very seriously. He has actually a really cool one that's pretty well known. It's like a 3-headed Christ. It's really cool. I'll show you.
I don't think I've ever actually. Maybe I have in passing, but I've never like known he was an artist.
I didn't know that either. So at this time, he's beginning to spend more time alone. He's a self-proclaimed loner. He's shy and reclusive in his personal life. But this is also because at this point, he's not separating Brian Warner from Manson anymore. Like a lot of people, like Daisy Berkowitz left because like, you know, he's changing. He's not who he was. And it's okay to change, but he's like really taking on this role of Marilyn Manson and like becoming this like douchebag, essentially. There's no boundary between where Marilyn Manson starts and Brian ends, or the other way around. He's just kind of becoming that. Like early on in interviews, he would say like, I'm Brian Warner. I've trademarked Marilyn Manson, and that is my stage persona. But as we keep going, like people start calling, he wants to be referred to as Marilyn Manson. He's not going by Brian anymore. His dad was calling him Manson. So, you know, he's making art under Marilyn Manson. He's working on TV and movies as Marilyn Manson. He's making music as Marilyn Manson. So there's really no time to be Brian anymore. So this is kind of when that starts happening, which I think is like a big issue that leads to a lot of this other stuff. Because I think it's okay. This is what Dad and I were talking about downstairs, like about the influence that he had on people, which as we'll start talking about some of the events that have been associated with him. Because I think there's a difference, like, you know, as an artist, as a performer, you're performing. Like and people need to understand that. If you're listening to music and you're listening to whatever, you need to understand that not everything is literal. Like, just because someone says, like, I'm the Antichrist, doesn't mean he's the fucking Antichrist. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to go and kill people because Marilyn Manson said kill people. You know what I mean? So there's, like, this, I think, personally, you need to be aware of that. I understand kids are impressionable, but I think where the issue lies is that he was starting to become Marilyn Manson, and he wasn't separating out Marilyn and Brian and, like, taking a step back to realize the influence that he was having. He was just engulfing himself.
Yeah, in the villain role.
Yeah.
He was in his villain era.
Always. So, third record comes out, Mechanical Animals. Major retailers in America would not stock this because of, like, they said the album cover was highly offensive. This is, like, early 2000s. No, this might still be, like, in the late 90s. So a lot has changed since then. But basically on the cover, it's, like, it's the one where it's, like, kind of the white cover. He's, like, the white ambiguous gendered, like, alien body thing. Yeah, so that was the one that people would, which, like, isn't even that big a deal. Like, now I'm like, that's so stupid.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to, like, stock it, which all of this is just adding to, like, what he's trying to do. Like, he wants to be this controversial figure. He wants people to question censorship and Christianity and all this stuff. And so even, like, he's still succeeding. He's still getting, like, #1 hits, #1 albums, gold, platinum, all while, like, stores won't stock his stuff. And back then, you're buying CDs. You're not fucking streaming.
Yeah. Well, people will find a way to get what they want, I guess.
Yeah.
It makes them want it even more.
Right. Like, and I think that was kind of, like, the point for, and yeah, it's super interesting. But, and then they did, like, alternative album covers and stuff so that they could sell them in the stores, which, lame.
Yeah. So
I'm assuming if you had the original one back then, that was probably pretty cool. So at this point, they decide they're going to tour with Hole, which is Courtney Love's band. A feud escalated between Marilyn Manson and Courtney Love. They did not like each other. Love was very upset because she was like, most of the money that they were making was going to having to help put on the production costs of Marilyn Manson's performances because they were so extravagant. And so, rightfully upset, I would say. After 9 shows, they left the tour. And so they renamed the tour and just kept going on.
Okay, I was going to say, was it Courtney Love's tour or was it Marilyn Manson's tour?
Well, it was both of their tour. It was like they were touring together.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know if, like, one was like the opener and one was
I mean, obviously someone went first and someone went second, but I'm not sure exactly what the situation. I think Manson was probably the headliner. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't really care to look that much into it. But either way, they were touring together and Hole was like, bye. And they just renamed the tour and kept going. Sorry, I feel like that, I'm sorry if that came off rude.
No.
I feel like I was like, after I said that, I was like, oh my God, I sounded rude. Okay, cool. Just checking. I didn't mean to be rude. I'm sorry. So, November 2000, Hollywood album comes out. And this is the third of the trilogy that was Antichrist, Superstar, Mechanical Animals, and Hollywood. So those 3 albums were a trilogy, and I think there's only the one before it, which was The Portrait of an American Family. And the trilogy is supposed to, like, represent the evolution of his life from birth to then. And again, the album cover was controversial. I'm not sure what was on it. I can't remember. Many stores sold it with an alternative cover, and this was actually placed in a 2008 ranking of the top 50 most controversial albums of all time.
The last one that you were just saying?
Hollywood, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think Hollywood...
Was that the one that he says a lot of racist things on?
I don't know.
Because there is one song where he's just, like, straight up saying the N-word, and I'm like...
Yeah, that is a big issue that a lot of people were saying. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with his, like, which songs are on which disc and all that, because he has a lot of stuff. I think, I could be wrong, correct me if you are listening and you know, but my understanding is that Hollywood was... So basically, Marilyn Manson has been associated with the Columbine shooting. And I'm pretty sure my understanding is that Hollywood was a response to that, being like trying to pull that out and be like, listen, I'm not responsible for the way people conduct themselves. Like, his whole thing was like the media was blowing up being like, Marilyn Manson's a horrible influence. And he was like, you need to be honoring the lives of people that died in a tragedy, not coming for me. And so I'm pretty sure that was what Hollywood was about a lot. But also, as we'll get into more of this, he is a white supremacist. Like, maybe that's a strong word, but his name is based after Charles Manson, who was in fact a white supremacist and was a violent, horrible person and, you know, believed in Helter Skelter. And he literally, Marilyn Manson has a song with Rob Zombie called Helter Skelter. Like, it's...
What is that?
You didn't listen to the episode.
No, I didn't.
Helter Skelter is what Manson... You know how every cult leader has, like, a thing where they're like, the world's going to end. So Helter Skelter was his... what he thought the world was going to end. And he basically said that black people were going to, like, revolt against white people. And so that when they started committing the crimes as the Manson family, they were trying to instigate Helter Skelter to start, because it didn't start when he prophesied that it would. And they were trying to, like, blame black people, particularly people in the Black Panther group and stuff like that. So, and he had the fucking swastika on his... So he's a white supremacist. Okay. I don't care what you guys think he was. And so for Marilyn Manson to try to act like he's not, it's very evident in a lot of his music and some of the things that people have said that he's said to them, that even if he's not, you know, blatantly one, he's partially one, and you can't walk around doing those kinds of things. So anyways, let's talk about his romantic life a little bit, and then we're really close to getting into these controversies. So he was first engaged to Rose McGowan in 1999. She did end the relationship in 2001 due to lifestyle differences, which if you look at his dating history, it's very much like, I feel like we have the opposite trope now, but it's this like goth, hardcore, punk, emo man, which I realize those are all very different things, but I don't know how to describe Manson. And then he dates these like pretty little actresses that are like not in that genre with him.
How it always goes.
Yeah. And now it's the opposite, where we have these like plain ass white dudes that want like a big titty goth girlfriend. It's
and then the
funny.
big titty goth girlfriend wants a plain ass white man.
Yeah.
Not me.
So that's kind of he did date, so after McGowan, he dated Dita Von Teese, and she was like a burlesque dancer, and she had maybe a little bit more of that kind of like gothy look with like the pinup hair and stuff. They were actually married in 2004, and then by 2006, they did divorce due to irreconcilable differences. And then finally, in 2007, he dated Evan Rachel Wood, which is about to come into a lot of what we're going to talk about. He proposed in 2010, and then they had another quick breakup. They actually met when she was 18 and he was 36.
Oof.
Yeah. They were briefly engaged in 2010. I think somewhere along the lines it says that, like, he had an affair with her when he was with, it was either Dita Von Teese or a girlfriend between her, but when he actually started dating Evan Wood, but... Yeah, so she was very young, like freshly 18, seeing this man.
That's a 20-year difference there.
I have done worse.
That's it. But like 18 versus someone our age.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like an 18-year-old is like freshly ready to embark on the world.
They might as well just be 17.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that was a little bit of his dating history. In 2003, he released The Golden Age of Grotesque, and this is when he starts going on like TV shows like Jay Leno, David Letterman. He became friends with Alice Cooper, Ozzy Osbourne, and Johnny Depp, which will come back into play. Yeah, this is about to get juicy. No. And we know Ozzy's just, he's a fucking wreck. He's a shit show. So yeah, at this point, he's firmly established in, modern pop culture. Everyone knows who Marilyn Manson is. He's got a global fan base. This album released The Golden Age of Grotesque. This was the second number one album in the US and top 10 album in the UK. So between 2007 and 2012, he released 3 more albums that failed to match the success of the previous albums. And the reason that people think this is because as social media and the internet becomes a part of everyday life between 2007 and 2012, like imagine, you remember, like how that was. His shock tactics lost their sparkle. Back in the day, in early 2000s, we would read magazines and look at pictures of our favorite celebrities and be like, oh my God, I love their jeans. I'm going to go get their jeans. Like, that's so cool. Like, if you saw like a picture of a celebrity you liked on TV or in a magazine, you cherished that moment a little bit more, where now we can watch their Instagram and like see what they're doing 24/7 all the fucking time. And so as social media is coming out, people are seeing all sorts of things. And especially nowadays, it's really hard, I think, for things to shock us. We're desensitized. There's so much like shocking out there stuff on the internet now that's like, I'm not even talking about like gory, crazy, shocking stuff. I'm talking about like artsy things. Like it's really hard for an artist to kind of stand out, especially with social media and copycats and whatever. It's like, and I think this also contributed to the blending of Brian Warner and Marilyn Manson, because now social media has eyes on you at all times. He's not going to show you guys Brian Warner. He's supposed to be Marilyn Manson. If he shows you the Brian Warner, like normal human part of him, which at this point I feel like is already gone, because we're 2007, 2012 when social media is getting big. Like he's
lost in the sauce.
He's already lost in the sauce. He's already fully sending everything that he has into Marilyn Manson. So of course he's not going to now show you guys fucking Brian Warner. He's going to be Marilyn Manson 24/7 all the time. He's always on. And then for like honestly, there's not much that hasn't been done now, which is what sucks so bad about. It's an amazing time to be an artist because you can like get money for the things that you're doing, but it's hard to really stand out at the same time because like everything has been done. Like, in the 90s, he was doing all this crazy shit. Like, what else can he really do?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
You kind of reached your peak there, buddy.
And there's this whole era of kids that grew up listening to Manson that are now doing Manson-like things and putting their own spin on it. And it's like, he's falling behind. He's like continuing to foster these relationships with these other celebrities and artists. And, just kind of reveling in this time. In 2014, his mommy died. She had a really particularly nasty battle with dementia, it seems like. And she passed away, and he was very sad. Like, that was his mommy. They loved each other, whatever. He came back with his album, The Pale Emperor, and this was like, it did better than these last 3 albums that didn't perform super well. It must be nice to be able to be an artist and be like, oh, my last 3 albums didn't perform very well.
We just put some more money into a 4th one.
Yeah, and like, just be able to still like thrive as who you are. This one did do better. It was kind of like his project that came out after his mom died. Then 2 years later, his dad died, who was arguably his biggest supporter. He was at like all the shows backstage all the time. He would wear the makeup and shit. Like he was into it. And then this is when his 10th album, Heaven Upside Down, came out, another commercial success. I'm not even sure like how many albums we're at right now or if there's more after this, but that's all I wrote. So now let's talk about the controversies. Is there anything you want to like throw in before we get started on that?
I just remember seeing a bunch on like Instagram, probably like last year or the year before, I can't remember. And like tons of women and like allegations, and I was like, yikes.
Yeah, I thankfully didn't have all that on my feed.
Well, I followed him, and I remember like he like made a post and was like, I can't remember what it really said, but it's something about like these aren't true. And I was like, what isn't true? And I like looked into it, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole with like, I can't remember some of the women that I saw, but like there was a lot of his ex-girlfriends that were just like,
yeah,
I'm sure what you're about to say. So
it's pretty bad. I'll go ahead and just trigger warning it again if you made it this far and you don't want to hear about some of the stuff we're about to start talking about it. It's sprinkled in with just regular controversial things that he's done as well, and then we're gonna get into like an actual timeline of it. yeah, we're going to be on this for a minute. A lot of this is from Billboard and Rolling Stone magazine, and I will also source everything I've talked about so far from like the documentaries I watched and everything. But so right now, this is just a little bit of like some bullets. So Marilyn Manson's fan club was called Satan's Bake Sale, and they referred to members of the fan club as the family, which is a reference to the Manson family, Charles Manson. So he's definitely got some cult-like tendencies. Obviously, the Manson family was a cult. And then the way that people start reacting to the things that he's saying in his music and his interviews is very culty, and whether he like intended that or not, it's not like he's sitting around in a house with a bunch of women like, come join my cult.
Yeah.
But he has a cult following. That's why
I mean, that's how I imagine the concert was, just a bunch of like old people that were like grungy and like off the rockers. Like,
yeah.
Literally like worship Marilyn Manson.
There were a lot of skinheads. There was just a lot of things there that were very interesting to experience, I think. It was just eye-opening a little bit. I hesitate to say I had a good time, because I did have a good time, but I also had a bad time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this fan club, underage girls were sending him nudes. People were, like, writing in letters in blood. Like, people were taking his image very extremely. More than a dozen women have officially come forward. Some are named, some are anonymous. So, like, a lot of his ex-partners are, like, women who've just had, like, brushes with him in the world and, like, experienced what he had to say. So this is early in their career. Like, I'm talking, like, right after 1994, they started making music. So Warner, this is where it's going to go back to me saying Warner, because these are quotes. This is from Rolling Stone. So Warner befriended bus driver Tony Wiggins, who joined Warner, and Geordie White, who was known as Twiggy Ramirez, in humiliating and abusing young women and men backstage. And this is all according to his book. So his book is called The Long Hard Road Out of Hell. It was published in 1998. It's like a memoir.
Manson?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so in this book, he recounts a time that Wiggins supposedly affixed a nude male fan who had agreed to be tied up to a device that spread his legs apart in a way that if he moved, ropes would tighten around his neck, choking him. In order to keep him from strangling himself, he had to work to keep himself in this awkward, vulnerable position. Tony stood over him with a video camera capturing his struggle from every angle, and that was a quote. Wiggins did decline when Rolling Stones reached out to ask him about this. And I think a lot of what we're going to get into is, like, obviously in some instances there was not consent, which we'll talk about, but I think a lot of people defend him because of, they're like, well, he's kinky. Like, in this situation, he's saying this man consented. But, like, I think a lot of it, how do we really know?
Yeah, I agree. Because I also had that thought. I was like, well, if he willingly, like, got tied up, at the same time, it's like, do we even know if he willingly got tied up? So.
Yeah. Okay, 1995 Smells Like Children EP marked a rare instance, and this is from Rolling Stone, where Manson's label told him that he had crossed the line. The initial track list contained 2 terrifying audio vignettes titled Abuse, culled from their recordings with Wiggins, the bus driver. In one, a young woman was whimpering and screaming in apparent agony as the bus driver asks, "You like it, don't you?" while whipping her and rattling chains. And in the other, a young woman describes molesting a 6-year-old boy.
Yikes.
So they didn't release those. In 1996, Manson threw a microphone stand into the drummer Kenneth Wilson's head, sending him to the hospital. So this is just another escalation of him being violent.
It always goes for the head, I guess.
Mm-hmm. We're going to start getting into the timeline that I have now. And this is, I combined these from Billboard and Rolling Stone magazine, and I'll put them in the show notes. So February 1998, his book is published. And he's honestly just spilling the tea, telling everybody what he would do on tour. Chicago Reader critic Jim DeRogatis called out at the time Manson was generally mistreating 1 or more women per page based on reading the book. The stories he's telling.
Oh my gosh.
So in a chapter titled Meeting the Fans, and meeting is spelled like meat, like food meat, like animal meat. So Meeting the Fans / meet and greet. Manson recalled a deaf fan who got covered in raw meat and had sex with a number of band members before getting urinated on by Manson and his bandmate. Again, we know people that are interested in that kind of stuff.
That's true.
Wink, wink. And that's okay if you're consenting. But we don't, I think just a lot of this is like, we just don't know like what's consensual and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one of our friends who went to Marilyn Manson, they met him and like they were probably only 18 or 17 at the time, and they were wearing pigtails, and like Manson grabbed her pigtails and said, "I would love to ride these later, like use these as handlebars later."
I remember that.
Like, oh, now I'm just like, oh my god.
Yeah. And what sucks is like at the time, like if that was me, I would have been like, oh my god, like, you know, I would have been like into it. But it's like I was a child, or like they were a child. It's like I can understand how. And he's exciting. And so you're like thinking like, oh my god, like this guy's so cool. It's all a show. And then you get to the bedroom with him and it's not all a show. Like he's still being Marilyn Manson. He's still being aggressive. He's still being misogynistic and harassing. And
Degrading.
So, yeah. So it's like, oh, intense. Another chapter details how Trent Reznor and Manson allegedly physically and sexually assaulted an intoxicated woman in the 90s. And in 2021, about 23 years too late, Reznor issued a statement to denounce his one-time collaborator. This is a quote. "I have been vocal over the years about my dislike of Manson as a person and cut ties with him nearly 25 years ago. As I said at the time, the passage from Manson's memoir is a complete fabrication. I was infuriated and offended back when it came out and remain so today." Okay, so I take back my statement about being too late. Yeah, they did cut ties pretty early on. Kind of when that era, like I started talking about when they started using substances, started doing the sleep deprivation, and Daisy Berkowitz left the band. I think that was when people started to be like, at first he was idolized by pretty much everyone, and then people started being like, oh, he's actually being a dick. Like, it's not just a cool guy front. Yeah, he's just being a dick. And so that was kind of what happened. There's probably more details about their breakup between Trent Reznor and Marilyn Manson that I didn't really care to go into as much. This is from Rolling Stone. In his memoir, Warner wrote about abusing a woman he called Nancy as part of his early stage act, describing how he would hold her by a leash and beat her on stage to make a point about our patriarchal society, of course, not because it turned me on to drag a scantily clad woman around the stage. So that was what he wrote in his book. He also claimed in the book that he and a bandmate plotted murdering Nancy before changing their minds.
Oh my god.
And so some of this, it's like, is this just what, if you are really going to murder someone, are you going to write in a book, oh, I was going to murder somebody?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, how true is this if, like, he wasn't arrested, if it's written in a fucking book, you know?
Yeah, it's like, I think, you know, again, at this time, he's published the book in 98, it's still early in his music career, like, I think he's still diving into the, like, he's a shock rocker, like, that's his whole thing, is, like, he wants the shock factor experience, so maybe the book was just an extension of that to, like, you know, really get people interested in him. But also, I think it's hard to say because, like we've discussed, he's blended the two. There's no more boundary between Brian and Marilyn. So maybe he is really just out, like, maybe this is just an outlet for him to really say how he actually feels, and he can get away with it because people think it's a performance.
I see.
It's like no one will ever really know what his true intentions are. Like, did he really plot to murder Nancy? Or did he write it because he knew people would be interested in reading that as a part of his character development? So at this point, 1999, this is the biggest deal that has happened at his so far in his career. April 20th, 1999, 2 teenagers gunned down 12 of their fellow pupils and 1 teacher at Columbine High School in the Denver suburb of Littleton. So early reports suggested that the killers were Marilyn Manson obsessives. They're saying that the murderers were Manson fans. Within days of the shooting, Warner called the assailants' act tragic and disgusting. Basically, the assailants were Marilyn Manson fans. But I don't think there was any, like, direct correlation within the actual event of Columbine. But there were other shootings, like, there were several other instances, actually, which is what makes it a little problematic. But there were some shootings at a school. There was a murderer, as a student. He, like, stood up in class and was like, "Say hail Marilyn Manson," and then shot his teacher and shot himself.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Was wearing a Manson shirt. there were other situations that were school shootings where the students were obviously Manson fans. There was a murder of a nun that was somehow associated with that, by like some schoolgirls at like, it was like a Christian school. And there was another
girls murdered a nun. Holy shit!
And then there was another teenage girl that was murdered by her boyfriend. And it was like Black Dahlia style, where he like cut her in half essentially. Which like I guess Manson had a lot of like references of Black Dahlia in his imagery and some of his stuff. And like these people were Manson fans. It's not like they're just like throwing it at these people like it must be because of Manson. It was like they were Manson fans. But I don't know. It's like, I just feel like you can't say that an artist is responsible for that.
No. I mean, like you said earlier, I agree that words have influence on people, but at the same time, in an artistic way, they're not meant to be taken so literally.
Right, because I was talking to Dad about this, and he was like, well, you can't deny that he had an influence and that he should be able to step back and take a look at, like, you know, even if that's unintentional, what is happening, these crimes are happening. And I'm like, that's fair. And like the blending of, again, Manson and Brian coming together into one person, like maybe if he had a personal life for Brian Warner still, he'd be able to step back and be like, you know, my message is getting skewed. What can I do to maybe not do this? But at the same time, if that's the case, I feel like you need to apply it to every form of art, whether it be theater, movie, television, like physical art.
Yeah, like video games, you literally kill people. I mean, obviously not all video games, but there's at one point, is it the parents' responsibility to like monitor what people are listening to and like actually take care of their children and make sure they're mentally well before they go murder people?
Yeah, it's literally a performance, but I think in Manson's case, he was becoming the performance, and so that's where it gets tricky. But I agree, like, because where do you draw the line? And I'm not saying like just because he's a good artist doesn't mean that he doesn't need to be held accountable. Like, because I could have an influence on somebody. I could go out in the world and be like, you should kill somebody, and then somebody might kill somebody.
Yeah.
And so, like, everybody has their own responsibility in the kinds of energy that they put out into the world, but then also people are responsible for themselves.
I agree. I mean, yeah, you probably could have toned it down a little bit, especially knowing how influential, like, he is on, like, 90s teenagers, and they're all literally hating themselves in life, and listening to his music, I feel like it just brews more hate in them, and they're like, I just need to let it out.
Yeah, it's a lot. His paintings and films appeared as evidence in, I think, the murder trial for the girl who was cut in half, and I think the shooting. So, like, they literally were bringing this to the courtroom. All this is going on. He wrote a piece for Rolling Stone, like I said, denouncing the media for glorifying his influence rather than honoring the lives of those lost in the tragedies. There was, like, a whole thing where they were trying to have like laws put in place with like the recording industry in general. It was like a big deal. And I think it just goes back to like censorship and stuff. Because Manson's not the only person who was doing this kind of stuff. Think about like Eminem. Yeah. Eminem is just doing the same thing, like talking about like literally murdering people and stuff. So it's like
murdering his wife and girlfriend, and he literally has like a song where it's like gunshots and she's like screaming.
Yeah. So like, it's like, where do you draw the line? It's a tricky situation. And I personally think people should be taught from an early age that, like, art is a performance. Like, this is a performance. Maybe children shouldn't be listening to some things, like, until you're an adult and you can distinguish between reality and...
Yeah, like, maybe you should not buy your kid that Marilyn Manson album. Like, yeah. For his birthday... Like, maybe, like, go to Kiss, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think there is some responsibility on the public to what they consume as well. Particularly during this time, too, where, like, he was, like, if this was now versus then, like, now it's so much easier to consume stuff. Back then, it's like you were probably...
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm like, you had to give your kid that $2 to go buy that album.
I don't think it was $2.
Oh, I know. I just always hear your dad, he's like, it was $1 back in my day.
Yeah, it's just like, you are actively impressioning these children. So, yeah. All right, so December 2001, assault and sexual misconduct charge. So Manson was charged with assaulting a security guard named Joshua Kiesler after he allegedly spit on his head and basically teabagged him. In
Oh my God.
the article, it was like rubbed his G-string clad genitals on his head, and I was like, why did you say that? Just say he like teabagged, like G-string clad genitals. I was
It would have been easier to say he rubbed his genitals on his head.
yeah, G-string clad. I was like, what is this weird erotic description? So anyways, he was accused of felony 4th-degree criminal sexual conduct along with a misdemeanor assault and battery, and Manson pleaded no contest to disorderly conduct and received a $4,000 fine. They reached a settlement. Later on, when all this Me Too movement stuff came out, this security guard was like, I wish I would have pursued this further because I feel like if maybe I did, some of these women would not have experienced things because he might have been in jail.
I see.
Because, like, he did assault me, and I didn't take it, you know, like, I settled and was whatever about it, and then he's like, I wish I would have done more, which is sad, because it's not his fault. He already did do part of it, you know?
He was already a victim.
Yeah. So April 2002, there's a wrongful death lawsuit following the death of actress Jennifer Seam. I'm sorry. Her mother, Maria St. John, sued Manson for wrongful death, alleging he gave her drugs and encouraged her to drive while inebriated. On his website, Manson shared a statement calling the accusations completely false, and I believe this is from his lawyer. Manson believes that the lawsuit is completely unfounded and is investigating an immediate countersuit against St. John for slander, harassment, and abuse of the legal process. After Manson and his 5 guests finished an evening at the movies, followed by a quiet get-together at his home.
Quiet get-together, all right.
He made sure that Jennifer received a safe ride home from a designated driver and went to sleep. Basically, she died in a car accident, and they're saying that it's kind of like, I think what I'm understanding from this is like, you know, when you, like, bartenders are responsible for not over serving somebody, because if they drive home drunk, then the bartender can be arrested. So I think that was kind of the basis of what they were trying to say, was like Manson gave her all these drugs and like encouraged her to go home or something. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead a little bit. In June 2009, in a Spin interview following his breakup from Wood in 2007, so Evan Wood, Manson revealed to Spin in an extensive Q&A that he severely self-harmed following their split. He also shared violent thoughts about the then 22-year-old Wood and how his song, I Want to Kill You Like They Do in the Movies, is about the fantasies he had every day about smashing her skull in with a sledgehammer.
Again, the head fixation.
And he said this in a magazine interview. So he's just saying things without any repercussions, and people are thinking it's okay because he's shocking. But no one will really know if he's just being a shocking character or if he's being himself and getting away with saying gross things. And you're right, yeah, he does have a head fixation.
Got teabag the head.
Do you ever see those TikToks where it's like, they'll be like, help me do a backflip. And so the person will like have their hands there and the person will put their foot and then the person stands up to like do a backflip and then they just like,
No, I haven't seen those.
oh my God. It's really funny, but also like if somebody did that to me, I'd be so pissed off. I'll show it to you after this. So in 2020, after Manson was asked about Wood's domestic abuse testimonies in an interview with Metal Hammer, he hung up the phone, and his team later released a statement claiming that the sledgehammer comment that he made back in 2007 was obviously a theatrical rock star interview promoting a new record and not a factual account. The fact that Evan and Manson got engaged 6 months after this interview would indicate that no one took this story literally.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Let's protect him, sure.
Right. July of 2009, he's making violent threats against music journalists. So in response to media scrutiny, he reportedly threatened music journalists in a since-deleted blog post. He said, quote, I am far different than the soon-to-be murdered in their home press has decided to fabricate. This is according to The Guardian. If one word journalist makes a cavalier statement about me and my band, I will personally or with my fans' help greet them at their home and discover just how much they believe in their freedom of speech. So, culty behavior.
Yeah, and especially people like of that fan base are probably going to take that literally and like try and stalk these people.
Yeah, exactly. And like the fact that he said, and my fans,
yeah.
Like there are...
Like, that's, I feel like 100% on him. Like
I agree.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this before in different episodes about how people get about celebrities. Can't really say that I've had a celebrity that I was like super diehard about. But like my mom was with Elton John. you kind of are with Suicide Boys, but not, you know, like this, but people get obsessed. People, like, celebrities get stalkers.
Oh, absolutely.
And weirdos, and like think of Selena, like, you know, just crazy things happen to famous people. Fans get really crazy about famous people. So, and he knows that, and especially with a global fan base, and he's going to say, oh, and my fans will make sure this happens or that happens. Like,
then they really will make sure. Yeah.
They will. And it's not like you're just like a regular like pop artist. You're a interesting,
gruesome, like vulgar artist,
grotesque, like antichrist situation. And like I'm not saying all this just like I'm into it, you know what I mean? Like I'm into that kind. I'm interested in that kind of performance, and like I went to the Marilyn Manson concert because I was interested in it, and I like to watch horror movies, and I like to listen to like metal and emo and all sorts of different music, but I think it's worth mentioning this kind of stuff. Like, agreed. You still have to talk about this kind of stuff. So, in 2010, according to Rolling Stone magazine, a decade before Manson rented this apartment above a West Hollywood liquor store in 2010, a former tenant, I guess it was a label and recording studio specializing in electronic music, they built basically like a little tiny recording studio in the corner of this apartment. The people who lived, or the people who inhabited this apartment before Marilyn Manson did. So when he moved in, there was still this little, like, recording closet studio thing.
Just like your old apartment. Where professional skepticism
where I would sit in the closet. No, it wasn't a closet. It was, like, an actual, like, studio.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Just, my brain went there.
Look how far we've come. I'm pretty sure that the audio just picked up my stomach growling.
Yeah, I heard that, too.
Yeah, sorry, everybody.
I thought it was an airplane.
No, I'm hungry. Yeah, so there was, like, in this closet, the only thing that was in there was foam to soundproof it. And this is what he converted into what people who dated and worked with him described as a solitary confinement cell used to psychologically torture women. They say that Warner frequently banished his girlfriends there, keeping them inside for hours on end to punish them for the tiniest perceived transgressions, and he called it the bad girls' room, and he would joke about this in interviews. The rest of his apartment was decorated with blood, swastikas, and clipped photos from porno mags, which there's nothing wrong with porno. Swastikas, not so much. There were, right. Other people say that there was a spray painted message above his bed that said AIDS. Like, he just really likes all the tacky shit. Politically incorrect as fuck. The carpets, furniture, and decorations were black. The curtains were black. There was basically no light in there ever. The temperature was kept at 65 degrees, and if anybody changed it, he would, like, supposedly have a temper tantrum. One ex-girlfriend referred to the apartment as a black refrigerator. Another called it a meat locker. And in 2015, Warner invited Rolling Stone to his home, where a wall sported a painting by murderer and rapist John Wayne Gacy.
Wait, he has, like a shrine?
No, so John Wayne Gacy was,
Bozo. Or Bobo.
Yeah, Pogo. I think. Pogo the Clown? I don't know. But he was a murderer and rapist, and he was also an artist. And, like, I saw some of his art at the Haunted Museum in Vegas. And so, like, a weird part of me is, like, intrigued by that. I don't think I'd want it in my home.
Yeah, no, that's bad juju.
Yeah, for sure. But he had one of his paintings in his home.
I see. I thought it was, like, a mural of, like, John Wayne Gacy. I see.
Just one of his paintings. So then again, it's like, well, it is legit artwork. So it's like, you could argue that it's like, you know, he bought the art, but it's still like a murderer made it. It's back to that, like, where do you draw the line between, like, appreciating the art and, you know, not condoning the behavior of the artist.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah, me too. Me and Lily were having this conversation yesterday. I was like, it's like so hard to differentiate, like XXX Tentacion. Like, he, like, beat his girlfriend, but I fucking love his music, and I hate to say that because he beat his, I think she was pregnant too or something. And
yeah.
Like, but at the same time, I'm like, well, he's dead, so I'm not even giving him money anymore. And, like, if anything, this money is probably going to his son. So it's just like a moral conflict all the time for me when I listen to people like that.
Yeah. I think it's really tricky to avoid that today, because we have social media and stuff. And so if you're famous in any sort, dirt is going to come out about you because people are going to see you like getting famous and people are going to tell your fucking business.
Yeah, of course.
And, you know, everybody, whether or not you're a famous artist, or like everybody has something in their life that they've done that is cancelable. I don't care who you are or what it is. Like maybe, you know, everybody has different perceptions of what's okay and what's not okay in their life. So to some extent, everybody has done something that somebody somewhere might think is cancelable.
Yeah,
and I'm putting air quotes around cancel because you all know how I feel about cancel culture. So it's difficult because I feel like in the last few years we've been seeing a lot of very popular artists the light is being shined on them as abusers. But think of all the people that haven't had that happen to them yet, that are still famous, like people that we don't know anything about.
It's true.
And then think of all the people back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s that were doing terrible things that we don't know about because social media wasn't a thing where people would be able to go and put their business out there. So it's like, I think that you can, I don't know, this might be controversial, but like I have a lot of bands that I like to listen to that unfortunately have been outed as abusers. And like, I think that there is a way to still appreciate the music and like not appreciate the artist.
Yeah, I think it's like you can listen to the music, but like don't promote how much you love them and how great of people they are, maybe type deal.
Yeah, like you don't have to like be all excited about that person. You can still like the music, but then I think there's also like we don't let people grow and change. And I think, you know, somebody murdering somebody, that's a big deal. Like John Wayne Gacy, like he murdered a bunch of people and raped a bunch of people, and you can't really argue that he was a good person and he didn't really care. Like and that's the thing too. It's like, is the artist, like, first of all, to what degree did they do something wrong? And to what degree are they wanting to change and be a better person? Because you have situations like this where John Wayne Gacy could not give a shit. And so, like, obviously he's not redeemable. But there might be somebody who, like, I don't know, like, said something offensive and they want to change. And they're like, oh my God, I should not have said that. And they want to be a better person. So it's like you have to kind of, like, weigh out that.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, it's a crazy world we live in. But yeah, so he had that painting. He also displayed an unused canister of Zyklon B, which is the gas that Nazis used to murder Jewish people during the Holocaust. So he had that as like a tchotchke, like what I have over there. Like, look how cool this is.
Knick-knack.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, it's cool to have like bones and shit in your house. It's not cool to have like that.
Like a genocide weapon.
Literally. like that's not cool. And supposedly, like, there were accounts, this is from the Rolling Stone, that people have said that like he would show it to like Jewish people.
I'm losing my faith by every sentence
I
say.
know. That's how I felt about this, and then I had a nightmare about it after I did all this research because I was like, God, this man is terrible.
I didn't know the extent of this stuff. Yeah, go on.
It gets really bad. All right, October 2017, Twiggy Ramirez allegations. Ramirez, Manson's longtime bassist, was accused of jack-off Jill singer Jessica Adams, of sexual and psychological abuse while they dated in the 90s. I think jack-off Jill took Hull's place on that tour, where they left, if I'm not mistaken. Following the allegations, Ramirez was removed from Manson's touring party. Did he fart? He's been farting a lot the last few days. We're talking about Ziggy. His tummy's been hurting. But Manson said in a statement announcing the exit. So, okay, let me just recap. These allegations came out. They removed Twiggy Ramirez from the group pretty much immediately.
And that's the basis, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is 2017. This is before any of these, like, well, I mean, obviously there's, like, weird stuff circulating around Manson, but nothing that wasn't already circulating about him. Like, he was already problematic and weird, but no one's like, this man raped me at this point. So 2017, his bassist is accused of sexual and psychological abuse from the 90s. So like 20 years later. They remove him from the touring party. And so Manson said in a statement announcing the exit that he, quote, knew nothing about these allegations until very recently and am saddened by Jessica's obvious distress. In a statement to Pitchfork, Ramirez said that he had only recently been made aware of these allegations from over 20 years ago and claimed, I do not condone non-consensual sex of any kind.
That's what they all say, right?
Right. So this is interesting, though, that Manson is, like, so swift about removing him from the touring party and stuff.
Maybe it was because he didn't want his allegations coming out.
Fair. February 2018, Charlene Yee, I think I'm saying her name right, sorry if I'm not, allegations. So she's an actress from The House, I guess, and in a since deleted tweet said that Manson was a, quote, huge fan of the show and visited the cast while they were filming the final season, where he, quote, harassed just about every woman, asking us if we were going to scissor, rhino, and called me a Chinaman. I know. I wish the camera was recording so I could record your face.
I'm like sitting here like,
Yeah. February of 2018, this is when Evan Wood comes out and testifies before Congress. So she's the like third major girlfriend that he had late 20 to the early 2000s.
She was the 18 when he was 36.
She was the one that was 18 when he was 36. Okay, so in an effort, and this is 2018, this is kind of like the first start of her making statements about their experiences together. I believe her because her and some of these other women, they like went and like tried to have laws written and stuff that give sexual abuse survivors like more protection and stuff. And I'm like, I feel like we see all these cancellations and stuff in Hollywood about sexual abuse and everywhere. I don't want to just say Hollywood because it's more broadcasted in Hollywood because that's what's happening in Hollywood. It's celebrities that are making shows, making movies. Like, of course it's broadcasted, but it's in every industry. We do see a lot of times where like people don't, I'm not saying that every single person who makes an allegation against somebody needs to go make a law about it. But I feel like there is situations where people just try to like, there are people out there that will lie about you to try to ruin your life and get money out of you.
But I think it shows in the fact that they're willing to go that far that it's like, you must be telling the truth, because it's like, I feel like somebody who is lying doesn't care enough to go to their like local government to try and have a law written, you know?
Right. Like, and they obviously already have money. These are like famous celebrity women who have money. They're not trying to get money from Manson. They're using their resources to help other survivors, and they were putting a lot of time and effort into this to have him held accountable, not to like get money or something from him.
Yeah.
So it makes it feel believable to me. So in 2018, Wood testifies before Congress. This is before she's named Manson as her abuser. She's just doing work for sexual abuse survivors. She hasn't even come out about Manson yet. So in an effort to secure a Bill of Rights for sexual assault survivors in all 50 states, Wood detailed her personal experience without naming names. This is from Billboard. And she said, "My experience with domestic violence was this: the toxic mental, physical, and sexual abuse, which started slow but escalated over time, including threats against my life, severe gaslighting and brainwashing, waking up to the man that claimed to love me, raping what he believed to be my unconscious body."
That's so sad.
Yeah. In August of 2018, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office declined to pursue a case against Manson. So the reason this is happening is because Manson had a police report filed against him at the height of the #MeToo movement for unspecified sex crimes dating back to 2011. The DA declined the case because the statute of limitations had expired and, quote, absence of corroboration, according to the court filing. So there's allegations, but no real substantiated evidence. Also, the statute of limitations in LA, I think California, I don't know if it's all of California, but LA for sure is 10 years. This was a statement that was made to the Hollywood Reporter. Under current policy, the Los Angeles County District Attorney must investigate any claim of sexual abuse, no matter how outlandish. It is not surprising that the DA, after investigation, summarily rejected the claims made in a police report filed by a former acquaintance against Brian Warner, aka Marilyn Manson. The allegations made to the police were and are categorically denied by Mr. Warner, and are either completely delusional or part of a calculated attempt to generate publicity for the claimant's business of selling Manson memorabilia. The police report that spurred the investigation was accompanied by the woman's press release and other attempts to generate publicity that fraudulently claimed she was held captive by Mr. Warner for 48 hours in 2011. Any claim of sexual impropriety for imprisonment at that or any other time is false. So Me Too movement was crazy. People were tweeting all sorts of things that happened. Of course, people have to look into these things. And I think the unfortunate thing about a lot of these things, a lot of these allegations against him, is that some of them might be true, but there's not a way to prove it.
Yeah.
It's all he said, she said.
Just sad.
In April of 2019, Wood testifies before a California state panel, and she once more declined to name her abuser while detailing her experience. She quotes, "The fear of being judged by society is debilitating, and the fear of retaliation from my abuser is paralyzing. I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD, including dissociation, panic attacks, night terrors, agoraphobia, impulse control, chronic pain in my body, among other symptoms.
And I think her, like, hesitation to name him even further, like, solidifies that she's telling the truth for me. It's like, you were so scared that, like, this man of power is going to come after you, and, like, his fan base is going to come after you, because I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, I agree, especially seeing, you know, like we've said, we're not saying completely that he's at fault for some of the violent acts that his fans have committed, but he does have a strong influence that puts certain things in people's minds, and all of that happened before she came out about any of this. So I can understand why being scared of saying his name is valid, like, because his fans might do something, or he might do something, and if he's already done something to you, it's not far-fetched to believe that he would do something again. And yeah, again, she's not saying his name, so she's obviously not, like, trying to get something from him. Not that she needs something from him either, but at this point, speculation is growing online that he was her abuser, because you can look back at, like, her
dated.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that dude was 18 years older than you, and, like, he's kind of scary and problematic. Maybe it's Marilyn Manson that was doing this to you. So traditional media remained pretty silent about this. Virtually no major outlets prior to 2020 directly referenced or alluded to the accusations against him in their profiles, interviews, or album reviews, and that was from Rolling Stone. So in February of 2021, Wood names Manson as her abuser. And she did this on Instagram, and she wrote, "The name of my abuser is Brian Warner, also known to the world as Marilyn Manson. He started grooming me when I was a teenager and horrifically abused me for years. I was brainwashed and manipulated into submission. I am done living in fear of retaliation, slander, or blackmail."
As she should. Good for her.
Yeah. She continued, "I'm here to expose this dangerous man and call out the many industries that have enabled him before he ruins any more lives. I stand with the many victims who will no longer be silent." And following her post, 4 other women came forward with similarly horrifying allegations, with their accounts shared by Vanity Fair. So Manson responds and says, "These are horrible distortions of reality." He goes to Instagram. He says, "Obviously, my art and my life have long been magnets for controversy, but these recent claims about me are horrible distortions of reality. My intimate relationships have always been entirely consensual with like-minded partners. Regardless of how and why others are now choosing to misrepresent the past, that is the truth." And this is from Rolling Stone. So the retribution that followed was swift. So as soon as this came out and he's been named, Loma Vista, the record label that distributed his 2017 album, and We Are Chaos, which came out, I think, last year, stopped working with him, as did his booking agency. His TV shows that he had recurring roles on dropped him. They removed his planned appearances, and his manager, who had been his manager for over 25 years, Tony Chula, dropped him as a client. And this is also a quote from Rolling Stone. "Tony was the only dude who could tame the beast when shit was going down. When Manson would fucking destroy a venue or a hotel, Tony would be there with a checkbook and a smile."
If Tony is leaving, then I would assume that he fucked up.
He knows some shit, and he's been there for it all, and, like, got him out of so much shit, and, like, now that it comes out, he's like, "I'm out." I don't know, it's fishy.
Yeah, I agree.
So this is what the record label said in response to it. "In light of today's disturbing allegations by Evan Rachel Wood and other women naming Marilyn Manson as their abuser, Loma Vista will cease to further promote his current album effective immediately. Due to these concerning developments, we've also decided not to work with Marilyn Manson on any future projects." He was edited out of American Gods. They, like, took him out of all the scenes. AMC's Shudder service confirmed it will not be airing a segment of a forthcoming episode of its Creepshow TV series in which Manson appears. So swift action on most parts. Phoebe Bridgers came out with support for the victims. On Twitter, she said that she went to his house when she was a teenager with some friends, and she was a big fan of his, and he referred to one of the rooms in his house as a rape room. And she thought it was just, like, his horrible sense of humor, but this stopped. She stopped being a fan after that. She said that she also alleged that, quote, "the label knew, management knew, the band knew." She didn't specify names or anything or what they were, quote, aware of. She said that distancing themselves now is fucking pathetic. Wood shares more harrowing details. We're still in 2021. So she wrote in her Instagram story that she had to file a police report after becoming aware of a threat about the release of underage photos of herself. So she had been notified by, like, I think Brian's wife at the time, Manson's wife at the time, they were going to release naked photos of her when she was underage and had been like highly under the influence.
Why? Like, why are they releasing this? And for
to
what?
like shut her up.
Oh.
So it was. She said that she had been given large amounts of drugs and alcohol after Brian performed on Halloween in Las Vegas, and they were trying to quote ruin her career and shut her up. Like, look what we can do.
Like you're underage. Like you literally have like child pornography in your hands.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
And at this point, so like they started seeing each other at 18, but like speculation is they were seeing each other prior to that, or he was grooming her prior to that. So it's like, dude. She included a copy of the police report, like in her release of all this information. She says that he called her a Jew in a derogatory manner, which Jew isn't a derogatory term, but you can make it derogatory the way you say it to somebody.
Absolutely.
He would draw swastikas over her bedside table, and she said that he would always say the N-word over and over and over. She said that everyone around him was expected to laugh and join in, and if you did not, or if you called him out, you were singled out and abused. So Ellie Roselle, did I spell that right? Oops. She came forward and she stood in solidarity with Evan Rachel Wood. She said that she met Marilyn backstage at a festival a few years ago and that he made compliments towards her band, but they were very like extravagant. And then she looked down and she realized he was like filming up her skirt with a GoPro.
Oh, just a few years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah. She said there wasn't, like, no repercussions. Nothing came of that.
I know this is, like, a meme, but, you know that meme where it's like, he can't keep getting away with it. He can't! It's crazy.
There's still more. So let's talk about Esme Bianco. So she comes forward. She's from the Game of Thrones. And she detailed her relationship with Manson, whom she called a monster who almost destroyed me and almost destroyed so many women. She alleged during their relationship that he assaulted her without consent in a music video, and during sex, he set rules for her life, and he chased her with an axe. And this was like the tipping point for her. So 2 years after they began dating, she moved in with him in 2011, and during that time, he would control her schedule, what she could wear, what she could eat. He cut her with a knife and then sent an image of the pictures of the like injury to his like bandmates, like thinking it was funny. She said she felt like a prisoner. And she said, I came and went at his pleasure. Who I spoke to was completely controlled by him. I called my family hiding in the closet. The actress, and this is from Billboard, the actress said she fled Manson's apartment in June 2011 and later broke up with him. Manson's lawyer did not respond to Bianco's claims. And then this is another little blurb from this same period. Stylist Love Bailey recalled her own traumatic experience with Warner on Instagram. This is from Rolling Stone, like a quote. Bailey was in her early 20s in 2011 when she says she was invited to Warner's home for a photo shoot. Bailey, who is trans, said that Warner took out an unloaded gun, put it to her forehead, and said, I don't like the F word, which I'm not going to say. Then laughed and pulled the trigger. She didn't know the gun was unloaded. She thinks like he's about to kill her.
Yeah. I'm like sitting there like, holy shit.
Yeah, she was sitting there and she was like, I'm gonna die. Like, this guy's, like, isn't he too famous to, like, kill me? Like, wouldn't people find out? And this part really pissed me off because he's been known as this, like, gender-bending...
Yeah, like androgynous.
Queer, aligned
figure.
Person, but then he doesn't treat queer people with any sort of respect at all.
And I feel like those are the type of people, like, those misfit, whatever you want to label them as, back in his day when he was his prime. I feel like those are the kinds of people that were probably listening to his music. Yeah,
and he's like essentially appropriating their existence for shock factor, and then he's treating them like shit.
Yeah. Just monetizing off the queers.
So in April of 2021, Bianco sues Manson and his former manager for sexual assault dating back to 2009. She said in her filing that he raped her in or around May 2011, and she said that she was often unconscious or otherwise unable to consent. The suit also claims that Manson and his former manager, Tony Chula, violated the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act when the rocker, quote, employed fraud to convince her to move to the U.S. for a video and movie that didn't happen. So that's, like, the human trafficking allegations. Like, he, like, was like, come work come be in this music video with me, and she came, and then they started dating, and he, whatever. So in May of 2021, Manson says that her allegations are provably false. His attorney said, these claims are provably false. To be clear, this suit was only filed after my client refused to be shaken down by Miss Bianco and her lawyer and give in to their outrageous financial demands based on conduct that simply never occurred. We will vigorously contest these allegations in court and are confident that we will prevail. So now, moving on to another ex of his that we didn't mention yet, but Ashley Morgan Smithline. In a People cover story, she went into detail about the alleged abuse that she suffered while in a relationship with him. She said that he whipped her, cut her, sexually assaulted her, and more. His spokesperson, again, denies the allegations. A former personal assistant reportedly filed a complaint as well. Ashley Walters, who used to be his assistant, reported that he sexually assaulted her, harassed her, sexual battery, and inflicted emotional distress on her. He would basically, toy around with her a lot and, quote, offer her up to people.
Gross.
Another ex sues for rape. This one, I think they didn't come out and say their name, but they said she was raped and subjected to degrading acts of sexual exploitation, manipulation, and psychological abuse.
I just want to know, how hard is it for him to find, a girlfriend who's into being degraded and whipped? How hard is it just to find, somebody who's into that instead of taking advantage of these, poor women?
I think that's the thing, though. I think he doesn't want someone who's into it. That's where, people...
I see.
You know what I mean? It's he doesn't want you to enjoy it. He wants you to not enjoy it, and that's what gets him excited.
It's gross.
And I think that's why... I think people misunderstand the kink community and stuff, because they think it's all of that, where, what Manson's doing, he's abusing women that don't want it, where, a lot of the kink community, it's all very consensual.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously easy for abusers to slip in there and do their thing, but that's kind of in any environment. But, the kink community is very big on, I am consenting to being whipped, and I am consenting to whip you. There's an agreement, and there's a synergy, and everyone's happy. But,
safe words and all that good stuff.
Yeah, but then there's situations like this where that wouldn't get him off. He wouldn't be excited about that. He's not going to be able to get sexual gratification from that because she likes it. He wants her to be scared. In June of 2021, Smithline sues for rape and human trafficking. Yeah, that's basically all that for that one. July 2021, Manson files to dismiss Bianco's suit. In September of 2021, judge dismisses the accuser's rape lawsuit. So this is the one that she didn't come out and say, she was anonymous in her allegation. And they say the 2-year statute of limitations had passed and noted that her allegations of the repressed memories were not sufficient to invoke the delayed discovery rule. So this person was saying that their mind had blocked out the memories that had happened to her. And then when people started talking about it on social media, she was like, oh yeah, Marilyn Manson raped me or whatever. And it looks like she was able to refile her complaint, which she did. November 2021, Manson's home was raided. The LA law enforcement searched his home after obtaining a warrant. There was no further details from that.
Of course there wasn't.
Right. Well, they got to keep it secret if they are finding anything.
I guess you're right, if they're building a case.
They don't want it just to be all out there. In January of this year, 2022, new abuse details from Evan Rachel Wood came out. She said that in the documentary Phoenix Rising, Part 1, Don't Fall, she recounts the alleged abuse, claiming that Manson drugged her and then raped her while they were filming the music video for his song Heart-Shaped Glasses. And so this one, I don't really have a stance on any of it, other than I think these women deserve to not have experienced what they're saying they experienced. But this one, I don't know. So Manson has continued to deny these allegations. His attorney said in a statement, of all the false claims that Evan Rachel Wood has made about Brian Warner, her imaginative retelling of the making of the Heart-Shaped Glasses music video 15 years ago is the most brazen and easiest to disprove because there were multiple witnesses there. Evan was not only fully coherent and engaged during the 3-day shoot, but also heavily involved in weeks of pre-production planning and days of post-production editing of the final cut. The simulated sex scene took several hours to shoot with multiple takes using different angles and several long breaks in between camera setups. Brian did not have sex with Evan on that set, and she knows that's the truth. Wouldn't there be a lot of people there that are like, are you raping her?
Yeah. But at the same time, all these people are supporting him. His manager for 20 years supported him, so.
Yeah.
It's just only now because it's social media. He probably was like, "Oh shit, like cancel culture's a thing. Let me just get out while I can."
Yeah, that's true.
I have air quotes around that because he could have gotten out a long time ago, but
Yeah, he just was like babying him and protecting him. March of this year, 2022, Manson sued Evan Rachel Wood. And he said her allegations were malicious falsehood, and he claims her organized attack is why he's been accused by multiple women of sexual misconduct. Okay, so May of this year, his former assistant's abuse lawsuit was dismissed. So on May 25th, the Los Angeles Superior Court judge dismissed a lawsuit against Manson by his personal assistant, Ashley Walters. They cite the statute of limitations as a reason for dismissal because the incidents occurred in 2010 and 2011. Yeah, so that's basically where that stands. And then you might be wondering, I was wondering about Rose McGowan. I also didn't see anything about Dita Von Teese. Like, I don't know if maybe she was an anonymous person or if like I didn't see anything specifically talking about what her experience was with him because she actually married him. And I think I did see somewhere that like the reason that she broke up with him was mainly because he was doing lots of drugs and living this like awful lifestyle and she was trying to help him. And then she realized he just didn't want help. Like he was fine with doing drugs all the time and being this gross man. And that was why they divorced. I didn't see anything specifically saying that she experienced abuse. But Rose McGowan came forward after the abuse allegations, and she released a statement that said, quote, "When he was with me, he was not abusive like that. But that has no bearing on whether he was like that with others before or after. I'm proud of these women and anybody who stands against an abuser."
I did see that when this was all going on.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, good for her for saying that.
Yeah, I thought that was good too. And again, like I said, there were anonymous reports filed, so we don't really know who those anonymous reports were. But they happened. So that was kind of like all I've got for you. That was the timeline of like from the beginning to now. And of course there's more in there. I know you had mentioned hearing about like him taking girls' IDs and like keeping them in hotel rooms. Like just there's so much. I could not even possibly pull it all together into like one thing.
That would be like a series.
Literally. We're almost at 2 hours of talking about this. Like that's
Sheesh.
Yeah. So as of right now, BuzzFeed said, as of September 22, 2022, there may be partial evidence to build a case. The police had completed their investigation. Information was sent to the DA to see if they could build a case despite the statute of limitations. And this is a quote: "His defamation suit has drawn comparisons to the recent case involving Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Depp and Manson are friends. Texts between them in which they have disparaged their romantic partners were part of court records. Heard was ordered to pay more than $10 million for saying that she was a victim of domestic abuse." So there's similarities there. Johnny Depp and Marilyn Manson would like party together and like vacation together and stuff. So it's yeah, like back in the day. So it's interesting that they're in these similar situations where like Manson's suing Wood and Wood's suing Manson and Depp is suing Heard and Heard's suing Depp. Like it's interesting parallel. A TMZ article published on November 15th, so like 2 weeks ago, says that charges are unlikely at this point.
That's sad.
Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, I don't know. We won't know until something happens or it doesn't happen, but I think it's just so long ago that it's like, how can we really prove anything?
I agree.
And you can't just arrest somebody based on words. So it's like a really shitty situation. Manson says that his music, art, and any other careers that he has, like TV shows and stuff, are essentially dead, and that he's been experiencing like traumatic mental and physical health effects from this.
Good.
Like he's depressed and anxious.
Oh, no.
And I know. Now he's 52 or 53 or something. He viewed his appearance at Kanye's Donda listening party as like a comeback for his career. So on his album, on a song Jail Part 2, he sings, "Guess who's going to jail tonight? God go and post my bail tonight," with Kanye West. Manson, Kanye West, and DaBaby were all seen together at this listening party, and they all worked together on like 5 or so songs on Donda. So all 3 of these men are incredibly problematic.
Yeah.
Like DaBaby and his homophobic comments and stuff. So very interesting that they just, I guess they're just indulging in it, in the villain kind of persona that they have, because it's like either your career is canceled or you just move on and continue being this like controversial shitty person.
Yeah, kind of like Kanye's doing right now.
Right. So, and then this was interesting. So weeks after the appearance at the listening party, Manson who is famous for rejecting Christianity, went with Kanye West to he was on his Sunday service live stream.
Yeah, I'm so confused here. He, is most likely a white supremacist and, doesn't like Christianity, and here we are hanging out with Kanye, who's, obsessed with God and, a black man, obviously.
Yeah, but Kanye is not doing any service for black men right now.
I mean, that's true.
Like, he's aligning himself with Donald Trump and, making comments about Jewish people and just inappropriate things that are, kind of in line with that. But, yeah, the Christianity aspect is weird. But, again, like we said, Marilyn Manson never said he wasn't spiritual, and there's things to learn from all. So, I don't know, but I just thought that was weird. And apparently Justin Bieber was also in this this live stream. So, weird. Some of his recent band members remain loyal to him. So they quote from Rob Holiday, his guitarist, "I never witnessed any kind of abuse in any setting. Manson is a sweet, misunderstood outcast," according to Tim Skold, who's currently writing new music with him, and says the allegations don't reflect the man that he worked with in the mid-2000s or now. "If you're asking me if I saw any aggression or abusive behavior, I did not." That doesn't mean it didn't happen. Just because you didn't see it or experience it doesn't mean it's you know what I mean?
People like this manipulate other people to make them think that they're good people, like fucking Ted Bundy, you know?
Yeah, you need some people in your life to not think you're a complete douchebag so that when it's time, you can pull them out of your little bag. So, going off of that, Warner's publicist offered Rolling Stone interviews with 5 defenders of Manson. Warner. Same person. Including people like Manson, a performance artist who befriended the singer in the mid-2000s. They said, "He's always been a supportive, wonderful friend." Greta Aurora, who says she had a consensual sexual encounter with him in 2011, says that she received an email from a friend of the accusers, whom she calls, quote, self-proclaimed victims, asking if she wanted to listen in on last year's support group, to which she declined. So that's all I have for you. Now he's living in Glendale or something, which is a suburb of LA, and just, I guess, just embracing his reality of this, but he's really upset about it. What do you think?
I don't think I probably would want to listen to him much after this. After hearing obviously I knew about the allegations, and I already kind of felt bad about listening to him for that. And then on top of everything that you just said to me, I'm like, oh my god. It's not just one little allegation, it's pages and pages of allegations, which is kind of foul.
I have 15 pages of notes for this episode. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's one of them is obviously telling the truth, if not all of them.
Yeah. And this isn't even everything either. This is just me trying to piece together a timeline for people. It's crazy.
We don't stand Mr. Brian Warner.
No, we definitely do not.
He doesn't deserve the name of Marilyn Manson.
No. Well, actually, it's kind of fitting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean, he created the own brand himself, but
it's very fitting. It's very culty. It follows along pretty well with the Manson vibe and the tortured Hollywood. It's his interview persona, where he came across as very gentle and intelligent, embodies the Marilyn Monroe aspect of it, and then his performance and interactions with people embodies the Charles Manson side of it. God, that was so much. Is there anything you want to say before we close out?
I think I heard enough.
Do you want to plug your Instagram now that you're doing photography?
Sure, it's Mandy DeCherry. Yes, I am copying Ruby DeCherry from Suicide Boys. Sorry.
Is there any extra letters or anything in there?
No, just Mandy, M-A-N. Oh my god, MandyDaCherry.
Okay, cool. Cool, yeah, check her out. She's doing photography stuff now. It's super awesome, really cool stuff. You're welcome. Okay, I'm gonna sign out because I feel like I did a lot of my processing throughout the episode, so I don't know if I really have a conclusion or anything. I was talking throughout the episode, but you can follow me on Instagram at ProfSkepPodcast. That's at PROFSKEP Podcast. I have deactivated the Twitter, both my personal and the podcast Twitter, for lots of reasons. Mainly because I don't use it, but also because I don't really fuck with Twitter, and there's just so much drama going on over there.
Elon Musk just bought that shit.
Yeah, and Donald Trump is back on Twitter or something, and it's just an app that's on my phone with an account that I don't really give a shit about. So I was I'm just gonna delete it. So that's gone. But you can go to profskeppodcast.com. You can also subscribe to be a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/profskeppodcast. You can find merch. Everything's at the link in my bio. Subscribe to the YouTube. I think that's it.
The link tree is in the bio.
Yeah. No episode today because I messed up with my camera, or there's no video episode today. Sorry about that. Okay, love you guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Stay sus skeptics. Mwah.